Hello, ladies. Welcome to the Menopause Made Easy podcast with Tanya. I don't do edits, so there you go. There's some real life blurpy there. Okay, so I have a beautiful guest on today. It's Michelle, and I'm probably going to mess up this last name because I'm not good with names. Routhenstein. How'd I do?
Great. Love it. I'm glad to be here.
Yay, yay, yay. So Michelle, I reached out to Michelle because I heard her on All Things Menopausal. I believe that was the podcast. I'm having a little brain fart moment today. And I said, oh my gosh, Michelle, I'd love to have you come on and talk about, empower and educate my audience about the beauty of our heart health, because it's so important. And Michelle is the owner and president of Entirely Nourished, and she specializes in nutritional counseling for heart disease prevention and management. She has a science-based holistic approach, and she just loves to educate individuals on addressing cardiometabolic risk factors for healthier hearts as we age. And everybody, it is so important to look after this beautiful heart in our body. I was just saying to Michelle before we hit record that if we could see the insides of our bodies, we would really pay more attention to our health. So I hope that during this time we have today, you really can start to see the beauty and just some simple shifts that you can do with eating and mindset and movement to, just encourage that heart to just be a little healthier. So welcome, Michelle. I look forward to all of the wisdom that you're going to share with us today.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Good. Okay, so let's dive in. I know we were talking about this a little bit before too, that, I've got some vanity. I like to look good and I like to feel good, but I also know that as we're going through life, we start to accumulate some plaque that we don't necessarily see from some of the habits that we're doing. And so if we were just to dive right in, what are some prevention, say in our, because heart disease is not like I did something on Monday and it shows up on Tuesday. Heart disease is something that happens all through life and it gradually builds. So, there's definitely some things we can do today that can help us have a healthier heart. So what are some of those things? I know that's a really big question.
Well, I want to start off with really emphasizing that heart disease is a progressive disease. So what that means is it takes years, decades for it to actually show up in terms of a cardiovascular event. If someone has a genetic susceptibility, if they have high lipoprotein A, the plaque can accelerate in their arteries and be brewing at a higher speed where you don't notice or realize any symptoms until it's 80, 90, 100% blocked. And so we need to understand that this happens silently. And it accelerates more when we hit the perimenopausal period of time, because estrogen is protective, and when estrogen declines, our arteries can become more stiff, and it can cause actually an increase in lipoprotein A, which accelerates that plaque formation too. So I say this to emphasize that we must be proactive in knowing our numbers. A lot of times people say, you know what, I feel fine. Why do I need to go to a doctor? And it's not so much that you don't want to wait until you feel really bad to go to the doctor, but you want to be taking preventative measures and understanding what that means. So going to the doctor, getting cholesterol taken, blood sugar taken, inflammatory markers taken, thyroid function tested, all of those things are important because you may not have symptoms until it's very much well advanced. That's one. The second thing you want to do is you can be checking things today in your home to give you some understanding. And then if these are not in the optimal ranges, we can use science-based nutrition to optimize them. So number one thing that I want everyone to really be doing or taking home from this episode is blood pressure. You can take your blood pressure at home, and if you have white coat syndrome where at the doctor's office it's really high, high, but you ignore it because you think it's anxiety provoking, that can actually do us a lot of silent damage, because the high blood pressure, even just 130/80, can cause a micro tear in the arterial wall that causes more plaque to form. And you don't need to have very high cholesterol levels for this to happen. So it's super important that we're being proactive and knowing what that means. So ideally, your blood pressure should be 110/70. And we also want to make sure you're taking it at varying times of the day. So I like to advise everyone to start in the morning when you wake up. If it's above a 110/70, let's add in a lot of science-based nutrition to assess how we can lower it, and also lifestyle intervention from sleep, stress, physical activity, etc. And then once that's normal for 2 weeks, let's move to the middle of the day. If that's normal for 2 weeks, great. Let's move to the evening. Let's find when blood pressure is on the rise so that we can mitigate it. A lot of times doctors will say, oh, we'll just monitor it, don't worry. And then a whole year goes by without any intervention and it's still high. And what happens with high blood pressure is not only does that micro tear happen, but it makes your heart overwork. It has to pump all that blood throughout the body and it's struggling, which is where the elevation is coming from. And over time, that can actually cause the heart to become enlarged and also the blood vessels in our bodies to become dilated. So they're bigger and they're more susceptible to even rupture. So an aortic abdominal aneurysm where where it's bulging and it can rupture is really life threatening, and it happens from ignoring a borderline high blood pressure that we just never knew about. So we need to take action before we have any symptoms. And the only way to do that is to be monitoring your metrics and ensuring that you're doing everything you can to allow for optimal blood flow and optimal heart function.
Oh my gosh, I love that approach because you know what I always say to people? Collect the data. Collect your data before things are a problem because then you know. And I love the morning and then the afternoon and the evening to really figure out, oh my gosh, I love that. Oh, that's so good. So good. Okay, and then just a minute here. What is lipoprotein A?
So LP little a, also called lipoprotein A, is a lipoprotein that's a genetic and inherited gene that's very actually prevalent in society, and it accelerates plaque formation in the arteries. It increases the risk of heart failure and aortic stenosis, which is very with stiff arteries, and we don't want that. We can't change this value currently. There's a lot of trials and medication trying to change it, but we're not there yet. What we do know, though, is first off, everyone should get their lipoprotein A tested, not as a scare tactic, but to be informed, oh, I'm at an increased risk. I need to do something about this. When we look at the research, if someone has a high LP little a, which is above 75 nanomoles per liter, we do want to make sure that we are optimizing all cardiometabolic metrics to a stricter standard. So for instance, when we're looking at LDL levels, we want that number to be less than 70 milligrams per deciliter in someone who has a high lipoprotein A. We know that we need to target ApoBs because centenarians who have high lipoprotein A levels, they have plummeted down their ApoBs to less than 70 milligrams per deciliter as well. And that's really been helpful in avoiding any cardiovascular event, because that is that atherogenic plaque that makes more plaque more aggressively. If we reduce it significantly through science-based nutrition and medications as necessary, we can really improve the risk. We also want to make sure we're addressing blood pressure and inflammatory markers, because when there's havoc in the vascular system, especially in someone who has more of a genetic predisposition, that's when heart disease happens at a faster, more rapid rate. And we know that that many people who enter into the menopausal period of time, their LP little a can increase during that time period also. It's almost like that gene turns on. And so we need to be asking for that lab, and we need to be looking at it from okay, I'm at a heart increased risk, but I can do something about it. I know I'm at an increased risk. Instead of being fearful of, oh my goodness, I'm at an increased risk and this is scary, I want you to take an empowered approach, because if you know you're at risk, then you can actually implement more of a stricter proactive approach to help reduce it.
I'm looking at my blood work. Would it be on my, it's on your blood work, right? I was
It's on
just like,
blood work, but most you have it's a new, it's really a preventative cardiologist would or lipidologist would definitely order it for you. A routine primary may not know about it just because it's very heart focused,
oh,
but it would be in your blood test. It's lipoprotein, like it's LP little a, lipoprotein A. A lot of times it gets when people don't know exactly what it is because they're not heart focused, they may put in apolipoprotein A1. That's not the same thing. It's lipoprotein A, LP little a that we're looking at.
okay, yeah, I do not see, I see cholesterol, HDL, LDL, non, and cholesterol. I don't see anything. So that's, but you know, just for me, I've always had low blood pressure, which I don't know if that's a good thing, but they always double test it. And they're like, are you okay? I'm like, yeah, I'm fine. I've just always had low numbers.
So low blood pressure is great, but what I want you to, but then this is also an important part. If you notice that your baseline is 90/60, and then as you get old, as you're aging and you go into and you're constantly checking it and you go back to the doctor and you see it's like 115/75, and that's normal, that's optimal for many people, but that's not your normal. Hey, that's a red flag. We have to understand your baseline so we can compare it to that. And the same thing goes with blood tests. When you're looking at your blood test, you don't want to just make sure that it's within normal ranges. You want to assess trends. If you're ApoB or if you're LDL and you're on HDL, cholesterol went up by 30, 40, 50 points and it's still within normal, but it went up. Hey, something's brewing in your body that may not be brewing in someone else's body. And we need to personalize the whole assessment. So assessing your trends and assessing what your baseline is super, super important to ensure that you are aging gracefully and you're being on top of your health and proactive on your health. Most physicians, unfortunately, are just looking for things that are out of range where they can medically intervene. And we need to be taking a preventative approach earlier than when medications is necessary. It's kind of the same thing with blood pressure. Most doctors will not prescribe you a blood pressure medication unless we see an aortic root dilation, or we see diastolic dysfunction in your echocardiogram, or if your blood pressure is 140/90, that's when we start adding medications. But do you realize that a lot of damage is being done before your doctor's saying that we should be concerned? So we need to be preventative because the medical system is in a treatment model and it's not in a prevention model. Medical guideline therapy does not recommend medications until we're treating disease. And so we need to be proactive to prevent disease. And that's really important.
Yeah. And you know why? This is why I say if you're listening to this podcast in your 30s, like kudos to you, because that's when I really started to make changes because I was like, I want to be ahead of the bus. I really, and lifestyle is so important for our health. A pill is great under some circumstances, but it's not a magic pill. There's no magic pills. And I know, listen, if there was, I would take it. If there was a pill and I could just do what I did when I was in my 20s and 30s, I'd probably be there. But I know that magic pill is lifestyle. It's your day-to-day consistent habits. And so even if you do decide to take a blood pressure pill or something for your heart, that's great. But there's also lifestyle habits that should accompany the medication, in my opinion. And I know for a lot of people, change is hard, but that's why you and I are here, because it's not just take this pill and carry on. It's first of all the prevention, which we're going to talk about in a second, but it's also a pill is better when you're also doing the lifestyle habits. So I hate to break that to you.
Well, I like to add on to that. So many people come to me who are on blood pressure medication and their blood pressure is still not optimal. Or they're on blood pressure medication, but they have a lot of side effects, or they just don't want to be taking so many pills. And nutrition responds so beautiful. Blood pressure responds so beautifully to nutrition. Within 2-3 weeks, it can be optimal. I've gotten people off of blood pressure medication that honestly wasn't doing anything for them. So what a lot people don't realize is when blood pressure is high, a doctor usually just will hit you with one type of blood pressure medication that they think may help break it down. But there are many mechanisms in the body that helps control blood pressure. So if that's not the right one that your body's struggling with, blood pressure still stays high. Then they throw another one, they increase the dose, they do this. But if it's not targeting the reasons why your arteries are not vasodilating and why they're being in a constricted state, it's not going to respond. And so it's super important that we couple nutrition with blood pressure medication, because oftentimes we can get rid of a lot of the blood pressure medication that has side effects. And also, we're helping to protect the blood vessel lining. We're helping to protect vascular health that a pill can't necessarily do. So medications are great, and they can be life savings, and it's life saving in many situations, but it must be coupled with science-based nutrition. I mean, this goes to say also with the same effect of statins. I have seen a lot of people who have heart attacks and strokes. They are on blood pressure medications and statin medications for years. And that didn't prevent them from having a heart attack or stroke because they never really looked into nutrition. Their doctor's like, don't worry about it, just take a pill. We must be doing both, because what we eat helps to protect our blood vessel lining, helps our heart work and function more effectively, provides us with energy, improves our gut health, our immune health, our brain health. Like
You go, girl.
this needs to be part of the picture. And so I think it's a really big disservice when someone just says, oh, take this pill, you're fine. You can take the pill, but please couple nutrition with it, because the benefits are going to be so much more powerful. And that's a really big thing that we need to recognize.
Okay, well, we're going to get into some nutrition tips in a minute. But first of all, I'm hearing a lot of women right now are getting ablations. Why would that be happening? What are they?
No, great question. So a lot of times, heartbeat irregularities happen during the menopausal time period, and it can be due to for several reasons. So atrial fibrillation, which is one of the major irregular heartbeats that increases your risk of blood clots and strokes, can happen during the menopausal time period because of when estrogen declines. I mentioned earlier that your arteries become more stiff, blood pressure spikes. That can trigger an irregular heartbeat. B, nutritional deficiencies. So many times when you're not having calcium, magnesium, potassium in food in the right dosages, your heart will go out of rhythm. And so you need an ablation to go back into rhythm. The third thing is GI issues. So we know during the menopausal time period, during a lot of these hormonal shifts, our gut microbiome can shift too if we're not feeding it appropriate foods in the right dosages, and our nutrition requirements change as well during this time period. If we don't actually attune to that, that can also trigger irregular heartbeats. So an ablation helps to put you back into rhythm, but we need to address the root cause of why you went out of rhythm to begin with, so that you don't continuously need to be getting a million ablations. A lot of times when you definitely need an ablation, I always recommend making sure your diet and the triggers for why you needed that is addressed before, so then the ablation can work long term, or else you will constantly be needing an ablation, and we don't want that either. So it's important that we're understanding why this happened and addressing it versus just going into many surgical procedures. A lot of times I've heard that, you go to an electrophysiologist and that's what they're pushing and they're pushing. So you go for it and it can be very effective, but they don't talk about the prevention piece of nutrition and lifestyle medicine around irregular heartbeats that can really prevent future occurrences.
Gosh, you know what? I mean, it all circles back to lifestyle, diet, movement, mindset, which is what you teach, what I teach. And I just, it's very interesting because I'm in the world where a lot of people come to me to lose weight, right? And so they're always like, I got to cut the calories, I got to cut the calories, I got to cut the calories. And I'm like, when you cut the calories, you're cutting micronutrition a lot of the time, because they're not necessarily, going for the fruits and vegetables. That's another conversation. But I'm like, no, we need to work on your micronutrition. It's like if you have a car and you just keep putting gas in it and you ignore the oil, your car is going to seize up. And that's what I see with so many women. They're just focusing on macros, the proteins, the fats, the carbs. They're not looking at the micronutrition, the soil quality, buying better foods, really understanding how important the micronutrition, the minerals are for the functioning of our body. And again, if we could open up our bodies and look inside that heart, and it'd be like, hey, listen, guys, I need some minerals or whatever it is to help me out here. So what you're saying too is that, you know, a lot of the times, like, I'm healthy, I feel healthy, and a lot of people will be like, I'm healthy, and then all of a sudden something happens, right? And again, it is knowing your numbers, collecting the data, and sure, there are things that sometimes catch us off guard, but I think the more in tune we can be with our body and to really understand some nutritional practices, which I'd love for you to share some of your wisdom in regards to nutrition, because everybody's probably going, okay, what? Because everybody's always like, what can I eat? What can I eat?
Well, I think a major point that I want to emphasize with the statement you mentioned is calories. When we are looking to lose weight and we're only focusing on calories, what ends up happening is you become nutrient deficient because you're only looking at calories. And the honest truth is, those food companies are here for profit. And
Yeah.
they have target audiences, and they know exactly who their target audience is. They've done the market research, and they're looking for, okay, they only want this much calories, so let's make this product be this much calories for the serving, regardless of what actually is in there. And the thing, especially with menopause and weight loss, we need to be addressing insulin resistance and inflammation, because that is what is really important. A lot of times the fat distribution changes, where now it's accumulating around the abdominal region, and it's stubborn. And the reason why it's stubborn is because that abdominal weight is metabolically active. So it is pushing out a lot of pro-inflammatory proteins that also increase insulin resistance. And if we're not eating to address inflammation and insulin resistance, what ends up happening is the weight does not come down, and especially that abdominal weight that's increases your risk of cardiovascular events. So we need to be focusing on what we're adding to the diet versus what we're taking in. And yes, a lot of times people are like, Michelle told me to eat so much more food and I'm losing weight. How does that work? And it's really the fact that you're nourishing your body, you're addressing the cause for why your weight is stubborn. And that is a super important component to actually facilitate weight loss and to maintain the weight loss. That's another big thing we have to remember. We don't want to flip flop. We have to get over this mindset of fad diets and dieting and going up and going down on the scale that actually can increase scarring on the liver, can cause gout attacks, can decrease muscle mass, which is so important for functional aging, but it also puts pressure on our cardiovascular system. And if we don't have our heart working for us, none of our organs work for us, because our heart gives blood flow to every single organ of our body. And once that doesn't work so well, you can't live life fully.
Yeah. And you know what? The one thing where I'm saying, like, menopause made easy is, you know, we're in this chapter for a third to a half of our life. Right? I mean, and you want to be vibrant. And I hear from gosh, again, I could go on so many tangents, but I'm going to keep it to the heart. But I have so many women that they're like, I just want to play with my grandchild. I can't get up and down off the floor. I don't have the energy to play with them. And again, the beauty of simple shifts, like, you have the same addition principle that I do. I'm not taking anything away from anybody, because people are so mentally, emotionally addicted to food. I was a sugar addict for 3 decades. That I do the addition principle. And when you start to do the addition principle and you get these micronutrients into your body, you start to change your gut microbiome, then your cravings change, because then you're like, oh my God, I feel like Brussels sprouts. Where did that come from? You know, and you really start to change your body. So because I have a history of disordered eating, sugar addiction, I am very susceptible to the language around eating. So when somebody says you can't have something, all of a sudden I'm just like, okay, I got to get it all in before I can't have it anymore. As opposed to, we're going to add these things in. And then what happens is the other things just naturally leave. And if you were to look at and I don't say diet, I'd say my diet, my menopausal plate, compared to what it was 10, 5, 20 years ago, it's different. And It's never been, I've never been on a diet. I have just added things that have benefited my health and vibrancy. And I have never felt denied, deprived, controlled, or anything. And I think when you can start to adopt that mindset and know that you are setting yourself up for this spectacular adventure, through perimenopause, menopause, you start to look at your food choices differently.
Yeah,
Instead of saying,
definitely.
I can't have this, I'm like, I can have that, but I actually want this instead. It's very interesting.
I would also add another component to this. It's the fact that when you feel deprived, you want it so much more. But when you're mindful and intentional about I'm eating this and you realize, wow, I have more energy. Wow, I can play with my grandkids and I still feel good. I don't feel like I need to take a nap or sleep for the whole day. When you realize when you're adding how good you feel and how much more energy, productivity, less fatigue, better sleep, all of these things come together, it reinforces the wow, I need to continue on this journey. A lot of my clients we're very big about that mindful piece and making sure, if you're craving sugar all the time, it's likely because your nutrition isn't balanced. You're not getting the nutrition you need for optimal health. If you're craving a 3 p.m. coffee, you're not fueling your body adequately in the way that it needs to be fueled. But once you start adding in these principles, my clients will say, Michelle, I feel so good. And it was my birthday. I went to my favorite old restaurant. I ate there and I ate what I normally did. And they're like, I felt like crap. And then I realized that I always felt like crap before. And now when I know what my body feels good when I actually give it, it's less inflamed. My hands, I don't wake up with stiff hands or joint pain or anything like that. That reinforces this lifelong diet instead of just a short-term diet. And so the lifestyle plan is super important. The other thing is you never have to be perfect for your heart health. A lot of times people are like, oh my God, if I go out to eat dinner at a restaurant that has like all this heavy cream sauce and I really want that dish, am I going to have a heart attack? I'm like, no, it's one meal. It's really about enjoying it, moving on to the next meal and really picking up. If you're doing this 80% of the way, you'll get optimal lipids, you'll get optimal blood pressure, optimal blood sugar, optimal weight, optimal inflammation, everything will come into place. But when we're in a deprivation of, I can't eat this, I can't eat this, you end up becoming nutrient deficient and you just throw up your hands at one point and then you binge consume it. And that's where we get into trouble.
Yeah, that was me. Deprive, binge, deprive, binge. For a lot of years, I had to do a lot of mindset work, a lot of unraveling, a lot of understanding. Listen, and the thing is, when I went through this, there was no microbiome. Microbiome's only like been in my speak for the last 10 years, right? So it's just becoming more and more and more. So I know it's an individualized plan. Like I always say to people, they're like, Tanya, tell me what to do. And I say, you know what? I need to know what you're eating now, where you want to go, and what simple shifts that we can make for you, right? Because everybody is individual. So I look at things like fiber, I look at things like healthy fat, healthy carbs, protein. And again, it's the micronutrients and stuff like that, but it's also the stress in your life. It's how you're moving your body. It's, are you eating for your goals? Like it's not, so when we're, telling you things today, it really is super important to spend time with Michelle, myself, a coach, somebody you trust, so that you get what you need instead of reaching for these shiny stars, and stop giving your money to the diet industry. Okay. And really just find out what you need for your goals. You'll save time and money and energy just by investing in yourself. So what are some kind of, let's say, like blanket where somebody can just kind of start and then, doing what I just said? I truly agree. Like if you and come and meet Michelle, myself, anybody that resonates with you, it will save you time, money, and energy, because you'll get what you need specifically.
So I think what's important to recognize is we need to prioritize our goals to help you become more heart healthy, for example. And what I mean by that is if someone comes to me with an aortic root dilation, and they have high blood pressure, but they also have, I don't know, let's say borderline blood sugar levels, and they have like 10, 15 pounds to lose. There's a lot going on here. And if you were to kind of say, we need to do all of this tomorrow, it's not going to build habits the next day. So, what we need to do, because when I'm evaluating this person, I prioritize, well, what's the top goal? So in this person that I just gave you an example for, I would say blood pressure really needs to come down and it responds really well to nutrition. So I would kind of look and say, well, what's one meal we want to focus on? So if we focus in on, let's say, breakfast, the person has been doing intermittent fasting, doesn't eat until 12, 1 o'clock. I want to say, hey, listen, you're not really fueling your body the way we wanted to. Research shows that the later you eat from the start of breakfast, the higher your risk of cardiovascular disease because you're not eating to your circadian rhythm. So my first goal would say, hey, let's fuel your body first. Let's focus in on breakfast. And I do this because when we focus on 3 to 4 goals, and 2 of them being nutrition and maybe 2 of them outside of those that support nutrition, like hydration and let's say stress management, we're able to then assess for challenges. We're able to then come in and say, you know what, that looks good, or hey, we need to tweak this a little bit. And then once we're comfortable with these 3 to 4 goals, we can add another one. And we constantly are adding small micro habits to then allow for a larger picture of things. So I answer your question like this because it needs to be personalized. You need to really assess like what is doable. In the upcoming week, if you have work dinners every single night, well, dinner may not necessarily be the thing we're focusing on. Maybe it's making sure you don't go to that dinner starving so that you can eat by your hunger scale. So that way we need to make sure you have a snack available to you at work. And that's our goal. A healthy, well-balanced snack before dinner. Maybe it's the fact that you really are sedentary, but you don't like the gym. Maybe you are now anchoring 10 minutes of physical movement after your largest meal to allow for blood sugar metabolism. So we need to understand kind of where you are and what are a couple things we can do in the next week. And we're self-reflecting on these in a week-to-week time period while monitoring your metrics so we can get to your goal. A lot of times people will say, I have a lot of anxiety around taking my blood pressure at home, so I don't take it. I like to say, well, we need to have an empowered approach. You have anxiety because if it's high, you don't know what to do. You think that something bad's going to happen. But what if you were educated on, okay, it's high. Now I'm going to eat this to lower it. I'm going to retest it and have an empowered approach. So we need to assess kind of what are your goals? What are you struggling with? And really assess what's one thing that's going to help you get to that goal better. So that's where the personalization comes in. That's why it's really hard to be like, oh yeah, everyone should eat this and that. Same thing goes with like, people who come to see me are not eating bad food. They've really eliminated everything. They're usually nutrient deficient. That's the problem. So a lot of times they'll be like, I don't know how I have high lipids. I don't know how I have high blood pressure because I eat healthy. I eat clean. It must be menopause. It must be this. It must be genetics. It must be this. And when I look at what they're doing, they're not eating enough calcium. They're not eating enough potassium. They're not eating enough magnesium. They're clearly nutrient deficient. And once we correct that, all of their goals and numbers come into place. And I think that what I'm trying to say is that we really need to be personalizing the science because it's not just about eating more vegetables. It's not about just eating more fruits. It's about understanding for you, where does that lie? Many people right now are pushing protein, but some people aren't eating enough protein. There are different people on different ends of the spectrum. And so really understanding like, what does this mean? And I don't like defining like everyone needs to go on this particular diet because everyone misinterprets that diet. Someone comes to me and says, I'm vegan. And 2 people come in, say, I'm vegan. They eat the same, the most different things.
Yeah.
Even someone who says, I'm a carnivore, they eat 2 different things. They categorize themselves in one thing, but they're reading it to what they understand it to be versus what the science says. So I'm really big about explaining the why, explaining, well, if you eat this in this quantity, what is it going to do for your vascular health, your heart health, your blood pressure, your waist circumference, your blood sugar? What's actually happening so that you understand and you can apply it to every nutrition environment that you face? And I think that's an important component. So while I wish I could be like, everyone should be eating this, and like everyone just goes out and buys it, and cardiometabolic disease is preventable, it's not as easy. It's really about understanding, well, what do we need to improve? What are you doing that can be optimized for your heart health? And sometimes we start off with things outside of nutrition. If your cortisol levels are high, if your sleep is inadequate, if you're not hydrated, we cannot add in a lot of the nutrients that we need. So we need to be looking at this as a whole person approach for all aspects. And I think right now we're inundated with so much things online that contradict each other, and people are always still looking for a magic pill because it sounds enticing.
Yeah.
If
Yeah.
you go on a doctor's website and they have a supplement store, red flag. Supplements are not a one size fits all solution. They are to supplement a diet when you have a deficiency or when you cannot get it through food. There are a lot of times where supplements are necessary, but if you go to a doctor who just pushes you a bunch of supplements, take caution. I had a client who went to a functional medicine doctor for having a lot of inflammation. The doctor put her on a low amylose, a low FODMAP, a low histamine, a low diet. The lady was like, I hated eating. I was so stressed out about eating, it sucked. She also lost the ability to urinate at night because the doctor put her on 15 supplements. The body cannot tolerate too much of these excess things. We need to fuel it. We need to give it. So we actually got rid of all of her supplements, except I think 3 I substituted for alternatives to optimize her well-being given her food intolerances. And then we added so much food back. She was having bowel movements that were regular. She was sweating for the first time. She was urinating again. Those are 3 detoxifying methods that our body does naturally if we fuel it and nourish it the way it's supposed to be nourished. So I say this to you because there's no magic pill. It's a lot of personalization. It's a lot of really looking at everything to ensure you're getting the nutrients you need for optimal heart health, optimal brain health, optimal functional aging.
Yeah. You know what? And I can see just from, so a couple things come out of that for me. So I will relate this to just my sugar insanity, right? Where I'd be like on Sunday, okay, Monday, I'm never eating sugar again. Okay. Total diet mentality. That's what I knew in my 20s and 30s. That was marketed. We didn't have the internet, or maybe we did, but I wasn't on it. And what I know now, because I said, when I start to learn about my brain and mindset, so many shifts happen for me. And when you go from, I'm never going to eat sugar again, or I'm never going to drink again, or take something away, right? Your brain goes, oh, that's way too big. Like that's never going to happen. And so your brain basically just, you don't do it. And so this is when I developed the concept, which is not new, but simple shifts where it's so tiny that your brain goes, oh, I can do that. That is so easy. That's too easy, Tanya. And I'm like, perfect. That's where we need to start. But the problem is your brain goes, that's not hard enough. And everybody's always looking for, it's got to be, I got to do the boot camp. I got to run the marathon. I got to, you know what? Michelle told me 4 things, start with 1. I'm doing all 4, right? And so this brain, you really, when you understand your prefrontal cortex, your amygdala, all the parts of your brain, you start to go, hey, brain, I hear you. I get it. I'm listening. But the simple shift approach works. The one step at a time. So there's nothing wrong with me. For years, I thought there was something wrong with me, right? But when you start to understand your microbiome, your brain, your habits, and I say awareness cures, right? Working with somebody who, like you, really gets at a detective level and says, okay, we're going to focus on this one thing, because this one thing of lowering your blood pressure with eating this kind of food at breakfast only, that's where I started, breakfast only, changed my breakfast, which then changed everything else, is that ripple effect that ripples out to change other things. So there's power in small shifts. So don't think that we have to, do everything. And I think Michelle has said it beautifully. Like, you start with one goal, with one meal. And if the meal is too big, you start with the habit, just something that is so simple to do, right? Done consistently over time. I always say, little hinges swing big doors. Okay. It's really getting that concept into your mind, but knowing that your brain wants something big. So know that, and then say, I know what you're trying to say, but this is what's going to work. And that's what the diet industry gets you on. It gets you on the big thing. So have faith in what Michelle and I are saying to you. Okay, what would you say about, because marketing is so huge, like you go into stores and it's heart healthy, licorice is low in cholesterol. What would you say to people with the heart healthy labels? Any tips? I'm not saying they're all bad, but I am saying marketing, you really have to put on your marketing glasses.
Yeah. So convenience items are helpful in our day and age. So we have to be very cognizant of what is truly heart healthy and read beyond the little taglines. Cholesterol is not found in things that are not animal products. So if someone's saying low cholesterol food, well, yeah, of course it's low cholesterol, but what else does it do? So just as your licorice example, licorice can increase blood pressure. So we need to be mindful of that if that's something that you're struggling with. But when you're looking at a label, you want to look at the ingredient list and you want to look at the nutrition facts, but understand what you're looking for. If you're looking at I don't know, let's say tomato sauce, you want to look at not just the sodium, you want to look at also the sugar content. You're not really looking for a high protein tomato sauce. So it's going to be different than if you're looking at a protein bar or if you're looking at a protein type product. So you have to understand, like, what's the use of this and how does it fit into how I'm using it to make sure it meets your guidelines for saturated fat, carbohydrates, fiber, protein. Each thing is going to be a little bit different. So you have to be mindful of, well, what is the purpose of this, right? Like when you look at yogurt, yogurt is a natural sugar. Do they have added sugars to it, or is it coming from the natural actual food? You're not looking for fiber in yogurt. So that's going to be a different way of looking at it than when you're looking at it from bread. So when you're looking at a product, you really want to be smart of like, well, where is this fitting into my meal, and what am I going to be using it for? And how much am I using it for? And how does that fit into my day to day? So you have to be smart and kind of put on your little hat before you start looking at the label, because a lot of times you'll just look at calories, but they don't look at anything else. And if you have a low calorie food, but it's, let's say, high in saturated fat, that can actually increase inflammation and insulin resistance and impede your weight loss goals. So you have to look at the whole picture.
Yeah. One thing I say, just going through all the things that I went through, is that I did not have the tools in my toolbox. And so what we're sharing with you is just a lot of different tools in your toolbox, right? And so it's not when you look at a label, it's really understanding how to read a label. And the food industry knows that, a lot of people look at calories. It's got the big calorie thing to distract you, or it's got splashy things on the front. But when you really understand how to read a label, and exactly what you said, Michelle, like, how does this fit into my plan for my health, right? So, and listen, there's all different kinds of foods and tastes and yummy things out there that can fit into your plan. So don't think this has to be, I'm working with a client right now, and, we've added things into her diet. And she's like, oh my gosh, like I'm loving my food. It's so good. Like, she's like, before it was always dread, like what you talked about. There was so much dread. And now she's like, I had the best salad wrap, whatever she was having. And that's joy. That's going to last for years and years and years. Dread is not going to last long. Let's switch to movement. Again, a huge category. And then we'll do some closing remarks. We could talk for a long time, Michelle, but what are some basic, I mean, I've been a personal trainer for over 3 decades. I'm just like, ladies, you gotta move. You gotta move. And I believe in a varied approach to movement. What's your take on movements for heart health?
I'm aligned. So I put movement into 3 buckets. We have our aerobic exercise that strengthens our heart. We have resistance exercise, which improves insulin resistance, bone mineral density, which helps to prevent vascular calcification and allows for functional aging as we go. So as we age, so we avoid osteopenia, osteoporosis. And then the third category, which nobody likes to do, is our stretching category to help with our arterial health, to allow our arteries to be more elastic. So we need all 3. And I'm very big about, again, realisticness. If you hate the gym, don't get a gym membership. You're not going to use it. Let's make sure that we add it in and anchor it into your day. If you don't like movement in general, start small. Start with 10 minutes here or 10 minutes there. It'll add up, but we do need to move because stagnant blood is the worst kind of blood. It pools more, it gets more sticky, it can lead to more plaque formation as well. So we need to keep that moving. That's really important, but all 3 categories are important. And I like to say, generally speaking, aerobic exercise, 150 to 220 minutes a week in moderate intensity is ideal. It's like zone 2. And then we want to also have resistance exercise, at least 60 to 70 minutes in a week's time period. Doesn't need to be heavy weights. We don't want to do failure to exhaustion where we're holding our breath. Our breath is important, or else you can spike up blood pressure to obscene values like 400 over 200. And we also want to have regular passive stretching and stretching in general, regardless of exercise. It's its own category. It should be every day where you're anchoring in 10 to 15 minutes of that stretching to really help reduce the stiffness in your arteries.
Yeah. You know what? I call it the balanced menopausal approach to movement. I don't like, a lot of people are like, I hate exercise. And I'm like, so let's call it movement, right? We used to move. Let's find the joy in just moving throughout our day. And I'm a big proponent of all the things you just said. It's so important to have that balanced approach. And it doesn't have to be a lot. Again, you start off very easy. You see what your blockages are, where the mindset, like if you keep saying, I hate exercise, I hate moving, right? Like we have to address that because movement is natural for us. We love to move, but then again, our brain likes us to be lazy. So again, you have to understand your evolutionary brain, and then get some skills and tools to move beyond that. So I've loved everything you've shared with us today. And just one quick last point about, I know we talked about it at the beginning, but preventing that belly fat, because visceral fat is different than subcutaneous fat. And visceral fat, unfortunately, again, as we're aging and our estrogen is decreasing, we can tend to put on more visceral fat, which affects our organs, which affects our heart, I'm also assuming, with that. And any kind of one quick tip on addressing that visceral fat? Or would you, I mean, it's everything we've talked about today, but
So when we have that abdominal weight, that visceral fat that surrounds our vital organs, it's more metabolically active and it's pushing out inflammatory markers. So we need to address inflammation. That's number 1, and insulin resistance, because those 2 things harbor that abdominal fat more than anything. In my practice, I've seen individuals lose 6 inches off their waist before 1 pound off that scale. That is inflammation at its finest. So we need to understand, where is that coming from? If you have acid reflux, if you have bloating, constipation, diarrhea, IBS, we need to address gut health. That's one. The second thing we need to look at is any other sources of inflammation, uncontrolled Hashimoto's, for instance, psoriasis, any autoimmune condition that's not controlled, that can be another source of inflammation. We need to be adding in nutrition. When we look at the research for the dietary inflammatory index, in order to reduce inflammation, it's a lot more about what we're adding to the diet versus what we're taking away. So we really need to really fine tune what is causing inflammation and what are we adding in to help reduce it. And when we do that, that really helps target abdominal weight.
Yeah, very good. Not the crunches, ladies. That can be part of it, but it's a very tiny part. In fact, I'd better off tell you to do some, oh my gosh, what my brain just left again, some back butter, Supermans. Anyway, oh, perfect, perfect, perfect. Well, I have just delighted in our conversation today. Is there any last words? And then let people know where they can find you. I have so many more questions, but I know that it's time to, and wrap this one up, and maybe another one comes our way.
Yeah. Well, first off, thank you for having me. My main thing would be take your health in your hands. You have so much power in you to really change the next decades of your life by really focusing on science-based nutrition, avoiding fear-mongering accounts, avoiding the restrictive mindset when it comes to diet, and really looking at this as a lifestyle change to age gracefully. We really want to make sure we're giving your heart the nutrients it needs, and we need to know your numbers, optimize those numbers, and really take action, because 80 to 90% of heart disease is preventable through science-based nutrition and lifestyle medicine. The issue is that many times people are hearing a lot of misinformation, and they may be thinking, well, that person eats, so they know. Really be looking at qualified professionals specializing in what you need help with to help you if you need additional support. So lots of things, but I hope that this empowers you to take one step to a healthier heart and realize that you have more power as long as you're proactive in your journey. You can find me on my website, entirelynourished.com. I also have an Instagram page called heart.health.nutritionist, where I provide a lot of complimentary tips. I also have a newsletter that comes out every week with a lot of great tips in there too. So follow me. If I can be of any support, feel free to reach out. I'd be more than happy to chat with you over a 15-minute complimentary call.
That's beautiful. Thank you. I will put all those links in the show notes. I've really enjoyed our time today. Ladies, if this episode resonated with you, or you know a woman who, just wants a better heart, and who doesn't want a healthier heart, honestly, share this with everybody. There's some amazing tips. Michelle is a wealth of knowledge. Gosh, you are, just a pleasure to listen to. So
Thank you
please,
so much.
you're welcome. Please share this episode with all your lovely ladies, and let's, get older and wiser and healthier and more vibrant and energetic. And we have so much to share in this world. So that is my wish for everybody, to really be vibrant and energetic. Know your numbers, get your data, take the next step towards a healthier life. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you in the next episode.